Hello, everyone. Strider here. Welcome to another episode of our Second Age show. Tonight we have an interesting cast here. So, Kyle, our wizard behind the scenes, as usual, is here. Hello, man. How are you?
Hey man, good to be here with everyone.
Always glad to have you here. You always need a wizard around, so that's always good.
That's right.
Then we have our friendly master dwarf, Warking. Hello, man. Hello, dwarf. How are you?
I am phenomenal. Always happy to be a part of the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you stick around to the end. We're going to do a couple shout outs for some people that we notice have been behaving themselves very well and being active in our communities. But back to you, Strider.
Exactly. Right you are. And with us, a very special guest, Mike. So, do you want to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to join the group. I've enjoyed watching the leaks and the content put out by the fellowship for quite a while. My name is Mike, and with my co-host Jen, we have a podcast called Watch Party: Lord of the Rings. And our kind of shtick, our niche is that we look at Tolkien through the lens of adaptation. So obviously, we talk a lot about Amazon's upcoming show, which is promising to be a massive, big budget adaptation. And so we've spent a lot of time talking about leaks from you guys. But in addition to that, we have a series on Peter Jackson's adaptation. We go really deep into that. And we like taking that approach because sometimes looking at the way other people, the artistic choices that they make in trying to adapt Tolkien's material makes us think about that material in a different way, forces us to engage with it in a different way. So we go through that process, and it's a lot of fun. We also have other Watch Party podcasts. We have a Watch Party Wheel of Time with different hosts who love Wheel of Time just as much as we love Lord of the Rings. And I guess I might as well, it's not officially announced, but a little bit of exclusive here, another exclusive. We're going to be releasing another Watch Party podcast for House of the Dragon.
Oh, right.
So that's coming up.
So you heard it here first.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, this is the place for exclusives, so I figure this is a good spot to do.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we'll make
appreciate
make
that.
sure all those links are down in the description there. So please check that out. It's a really wonderful podcast. You guys do a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's awesome to have a guest like that here because we are, of course, going to discuss adapting certain elements of lore into the Amazon's show. So, would you, Mike, do us the honor and read our first exclusive?
It would be my honor. So the first exclusive here, everyone believes orcs are extinct and all destroyed in the First Age. And that goes together with the next, which says, when Bronwyn's village finds out that orcs are back on the menu, it's a big shock. So I guess
Sounds
that
like
begs
a
the
big shock.
question, and I'll throw it back to you, Strider. Why does everyone think orcs are extinct? I guess that's the question that comes to mind.
Yeah, so a lot of people that are watching the show probably know why that is, but that's definitely going to be a question for probably the majority, actually, of viewers who will tune in to watch the show when it releases. So, yeah, so what do we think? Obviously, the First Age ended the way it ended, with a huge battle and huge victory with the War of Wrath against Melkor and I guess Morgoth or Melkor and his forces, and of course evil was thought to be extinct. So what do we think? How will people like behind the show approach this? Warking, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, it spurs on so many thoughts that could be up for discussion. So again, everybody thinks that orcs are extinct and they're all destroyed in the First Age. Bronwyn's village somehow finds out that orcs are back on the menu, and it's a big shock for everybody. Like, they have to be close by to Bronwyn's village. It can't just be somebody finding them and getting slaughtered, because then you wouldn't be able to find out. Like, there are so many ways that they could play this, and the fascinating part of this to me when thinking about this is how will they in the show represent the orcs coming to life again? Is it going to be through corruption? Do they have rights to that? Will they have to do it some other way where they're like made somewhere? And again, wherever it happens at, it has to be close by to Bronwyn's village. Is there a lore element to why that would be in a more southern area that this is happening at? I know the intelligent thing is stay away from the dwarven areas because then they would get outed and re-extinct real quick. But that, like, there's so much to think about and there's so much wrapped up in it. It's a little bit of text, but it has like wide-ranging implications.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the time compression thing that we know is a thing now, presents an issue because there's a whole, like, the first 1,000 years where Sauron is kind of nowhere to be found, and then around the 1,000th year he kind of reappears and orcs reappear, and then this is where they're starting to build the foundations of Barad-dûr. So I wonder if we'll be seeing the beginnings of that. Like, is this a reintroduction of evil into the world as a whole? Is Sauron declaring himself here? Where exactly are we starting with this show?
Yeah, I think this fits in with a lot of other little nuggets that we've gotten. In the Vanity Fair article, the second one, that was like, the 10 burning questions, we learned from the showrunners, they said that the first season is really going to be hero focused and not Sauron focused, which is something I liked. And, and then we also take it all the way back to the first sort of series synopsis or season synopsis, that it starts in a time of relative peace. Right. And so, I kind of wondered, well, where are they going with that? It's just the first episode. They tell us, hey, everything's peaceful. And then orcs come in and then it's chaos, at the end of the first episode. Or are they really going to be stretching out this time of relative peace, and the reintroduction of evil would take a long time, which would be something I would like, because I like kind of slow burn type of narratives. And I think, when we think about what the showrunner said, that they really want to focus on the heroes and not Sauron. We may not even see Sauron in the first season. That means that the slow introduction of orcs is going to be probably the first, like, a major through a plot line throughout the first season, which I really, really like. And I think it's also, I like that it's consistent with the lore. I mean, take that where we can. We know that there's not a whole lot of reference to it, but if you look in the Fellowship of the Rings, which, not the Silmarillion or things like that, in the Fellowship of the Rings, the Council of Elrond, which is something they do have the rights to, so that's what they're adapting. The one kind of reference to the state of things at the start of the Second Age is from Elrond, who, when he's talking about the War of the Last Alliance at the end of the Second Age, he's comparing it to the War of Wrath, and he said, I remember well the splendor of their banners, he said. It recalled to me the glory of the elder days and the hosts of Beleriand. So many great princes and captains were assembled, and yet not so many, not so fair as when Thangorodrim was broken, and the elves deemed that evil was ended forever. It was not so. So that's like the one textual really kind of proof that the elves, for some reason, really thought that evil was totally extinct. Morgoth was gone. They're like, good, we did it. Solve that problem, and we don't have to worry about things anymore. And they didn't really do their due diligence in terms of getting all the evil out. Yanwei came over and talked to Sauron, and Sauron was like, yeah, maybe I'll come back to Valinor, or maybe not. And then he runs away, and Yanwei doesn't go after him, and they just forget that Sauron's out there. And then half the Noldorin elves, a bunch of the elves, go back to Valinor, kind of depleting the armies of the good in Middle-earth. So when we start the Second Age, it's a time of peace, but also the forces of good are depleted, and they haven't rooted out all the evil, and they're kind of allowed to, in secret, regain strength. And so I think the show is going to be dropping us into that spot where the secret forces of evil that are kind of have been growing and mustering somewhere are finally starting to, peek their heads out of their caves and out of their holes and wreak a little havoc. So I kind of like that they're putting us right in that spot. It's a good spot to start the story in. Yeah,
I just have to say really quickly, that quote from Elrond that you just mentioned really brought my head to that scene where we reported that we see Finrod in the teaser, and that's where that battle with the orcs is happening. If you look really closely, it looks like there are volcanoes in the background. So what if we're getting that quote from Elrond as a flashback to Thangorodrim?
Oh yeah,
that would be pretty cool.
That would be awesome.
50-50
on if that's how they do it, but now that is kind of an idea here, man, that would make a lot of sense, Kyle.
I think they also said they took, from my understanding of what I read, they took parts of the Fellowship and the Two Towers and the Return of the King and used those lines of dialogue where they could use them. So I do wonder.
Yeah, but also it's important to have in mind the problem of time compression.
Yeah.
Of timeline compression, because as it was just said, there was like 1,000 years of peace. It was thought that it's rooted out, and then it starts happening, and then there's like the rings are made, the Mordor becomes a thing, the wars start, but they go on, they last for years and years and years, and obviously then you have this build up to the great wars and when then Numenor comes and all that, but in the show we have apparently 5 seasons, and it's going to be time compressed. It's going to be quite interesting to see how they will do this build up, because I agree with as Mike said, like it would be cool to have it like a slow burn, like to have hints every, like maybe in the first couple episodes, not to have orcs come in and like kill everybody in like some village or some place or somewhere and like in the 50th minute of the first season. It would be good to have a slow build up, but it's going to be very interesting to see how they do that, especially because from when it comes to elves, they are way more likely to, of course, know what's happening, what happened in the first age, and who Morgoth is. I think probably the majority of of humans, of men in Middle Earth, they probably don't know who Morgoth was, what was the War of Wrath and all that. So for a lot of them, orcs could be just like some sort of boogeyman from legends long past. So that's going to be interesting, definitely, how to do that. And as it says, like it's going to be a big shock for Bronwyn's village when the orcs show up again. Yeah. It's going to be interesting how they will do this, definitely.
And I wonder, how does this fit into what we know about Galadriel? Because isn't some of the leaks that we've heard about her, isn't it that she's kind of still pursuing orcs, and that she's kind of unique in that respect? Like she's a bit of on a revenge mission. Everyone else is like, "What are you doing? This isn't a problem," and that kind of sets her apart from her communities. So it seems like that all kind of ties together a little bit. That they're really going to play up what you said for a lot of the human communities and the mortal communities. Orcs are a boogeyman, a myth that they don't believe in anymore. And even the elves, who know that they're real, some of them are just kind of not wanting to admit that it's still a problem. And Galadriel is going to be there the whole time saying, "No, this is an issue. Pay attention to this." And then when maybe the season 1 will end, or a thematic, an important plot moment will happen sometime in the middle when it's revealed that she's correct, and all of a sudden all of everything that she said is validated.
I think you're
I think
on
it was
the
in the
nose
Vanity
there.
Fair article. I think they had made mentioned that she has like a damaged blade or something of the sort from killing so many orcs. Like you said, like that whole bit of it is fascinating, and I'm hoping that like the War Galadriel is something that plays out early on in season 1, and we get that more of like a, not so much of a slow burn, but like a slow burn in her going from like proud fighter and leader of armies to the Galadriel that most people attach themselves to, which is like the one from the movies.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see that arc over the course of the whole series, right? To see her become that, that person who she is in the Third Age. That'll be really cool.
My favorite part of this bit that we just did was when he read that quote. I think it was like the last line. It said something along the lines of like, "An elves thought," and they turned out to be wrong. Just want to point out that elves are wrong often. So sometimes when you read things like the Nalgrim, like dwarves, hadn't been, the females hadn't really been seen, and they look just like the men, that's from an elf perspective, and it could be completely wrong.
You're right.
What is it that Frodo said when he meets Gildor in like the first book of Fellowship? Don't ask an elf for advice because they'll say both yes and no.
Yeah.
And also, I think Warking could actually be definite. Like, there's one evidence to prove that Warking is definitely onto something, because when we see Bilbo, when Frodo and hobbits arrive to Rivendell, and then he sees Bilbo, and then they're in the Hall of Fire. and then doing the poems and all that. And Bilbo. Okay, this is like a digression from what we are discussing, but to prove Warking's point, some elves have certain racial issues because Lindir says that for elves all mortals are the same, which is his excuse why he cannot distinguish Bilbo's from Aragorn's verses in the poem of Arundel. So I mean that would make sense regarding the dwarven ladies.
Yeah, when you live as long as they do, you probably forget just as much as you remember, or you end up misremembering because there's just so much there. But let's get on to the next exclusive, which is just like in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, there will be an important orc character with lines and a story arc. And he is incredibly similar to this orc from Lord of the Rings that you will see on your screen. My own personal thoughts on that, it'll be cool to see another orc get storylines and a story arc. I'm just concerned from a dwarven perspective because the last time orcs got a whole bunch of lines in a movie, there were a lot of dwarves that wound up dead. And that is a major concern for me. Kyle, what do you think about what I just delved into too deeply?
I think you dove a little too deep there for me. Was there a name for that? Was that one of the named orcs? Does anyone remember?
You mean like Azog or Bolg?
Not them. Not those ones. This image we have of this dwarf or this
I don't know
sorry.
if we ever got a name for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know if he has a name, but his line is one of my favorite lines from The Lord of the Rings.
What? Yeah.
What about them? They're fresh.
Yes, and then
why can't we have some meat?
Yeah, I say that before sitting down to dinner all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be cool to see, like, there's more opportunity to explore orcs from a character perspective, right? Like they'll have a story and a character arc, and they should, right? Like we want to see that side of the orc as well. It makes things a little more nuanced, I think, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity to explore that here.
Yeah, the only thing that I don't like about this leak is the preamble. Just like in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, not a huge fan of the Hobbit films or what they did with Azog in the Hobbit films. So I'm hoping it's more like Lord of the Rings than The Hobbit. But in all seriousness, I think it's good to have some plot lines with the orcs. You don't want them to just be the mindless evil, just red shirts that get killed, and they don't have any storylines at all whatsoever. And I hope that we see, or that they use these plot lines as a way to explore, their different orcish communities, and they fight each other a lot, and that's part of what makes orcs so different from the other free peoples. I mean, the Fellowship of the Ring is about a fellowship. It's about people coming together, elves and men and dwarves coming together, putting aside their differences to fight evil. And the orcs are forced to hang out together and fight together, but they can't stick to that plan, and they end up killing each other more often than not. And the inability to set aside differences and to join different communities, that's one of the things that makes orcs bad as opposed to the other groups. So I hope that they explore that aspect of it. I hope we see different orcish clans and the little differences in between them, but mostly their inability to get along.
I think when you compare it to other stories that have been told that people loved and then were possibly disappointed with later on, when you think back to Game of Thrones, for example, the Night King himself, part of the reason people were so upset with how the Night King kind of went out, and I don't want to, spoil anything for anybody who, missed like 10 good years of TV, but the way the Night King dies, a lot of people were very, very upset with. But the reason they are upset was because we had spent 5, 6, 7 seasons putting together all this story of like how intimidating and kind of like badass the Night King can be. So then you get more attached to like the fear of that character and the damage he can cause. If you don't give orcs storylines, then they're kind of like seasons 3, 4, and 5 of The Walking Dead zombies, where zombies were the scary thing originally, but nobody really fears them anymore for the most part. if you don't give orcs, like the viewers, reasons to fear the orcs for real, then they're just going to kind of like sweep them to the side all the time and not really care about what's going on with them. So I think it's smart to do it. I just hope they do it a little bit better and more nuanced than what we saw in The Hobbit, for instance.
Exactly, and I would also say that it is also the question of quantity and quality, and like you need, of course, quality over quantity. So having orc storylines is, I agree, it's definitely important, but hopefully they will also not overdo it, because I think one of the things that is happening more and more often in, at least, like in the mainstream movies where we have like heroic sagas, the villains are portrayed more and more graciously, and it's harder to distinguish the good and the bad. But in Tolkien's works, most of the time, it is pretty clear of a divide between, like, orcs are, it's not their fault that they exist and they are what they are, but they are twisted into something evil, generally speaking. Of course, there are like debates on the internet about the morality and the communities of orcs. Did they all really want to be evil or not? Of course, and that may be something to tackle with, definitely in this show, of course. But maybe just the balance is very important, I believe, into making them like to feel like a threat, not just someone that you feel like, okay, maybe they're not that bad or something like that. I don't know. Like, am I coming across clearly?
You don't want to see an orc that's like an anti-hero that we're actually rooting for in some weird way.
Yeah, I think that nails it on the head a little bit. Yeah. In
the world of Middle Earth,
Tolkien draws distinct lines between good and evil, and there's a reason for that. And I just want to also clarify that we're talking about gray characters here, not great characters. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah, there are many great characters in The Lord of the Rings, but not that many gray characters.
That's right. Other than Gandalf.
Yeah. Indeed. And some wannabes like Saruman.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a split mind in terms of the orc issue, kind of like how Tolkien was later in life. He was very conflicted later in life in terms of what the origins of the orcs are, and redemption is a big theme that he explores in his stories, and why are the orcs exempt from the ability to be there's no redemption available to them, and how can that be, especially if they were originally elves, one of the first children of Iluvatar. And he kind of struggled with that. Like, this seems a little screwed up. The elvish spirit is so eternally corrupted that all their children are no longer have a chance to be elves. They're all orcs, and so that's why you get all kinds of. We don't have to get too deep into this, but there's all kinds of other versions where, okay, maybe they were twisted men, and the original legend was maybe they're just automatons, that Morgoth created out of clay, and so he had throughout his life constantly tweaked and changed and struggled with the origin of orcs. And so it begs the question now, if we're going to have plot lines, do we need to explore some possibility of redemption or show some good qualities? Because what's the point of exploring a plot line with a character that is wholly evil? If you can't empathize with them in any way, if you can't root for anything that's going on, what's the point of showing a plot line? Now, it could be like how they did in The Lord of the Rings, where you didn't really have fully fledged plot lines, but they were just kind of like you'd have occasional scenes. And the only point of getting FaceTime with any of the orcs is to see how they interact with your heroes. So like the orcish character that we're seeing an image of here, they matter because we're following Merry and Pippin, and they've been captured by the orcs. So you need to have a few key orcish villains. So if they're doing it like that, then fine. But if they're fleshing out plot lines in a more serious way, then I would think for us to care about that, there has to be some redemption available, the possibility of redemption for those orcish characters. So, and I don't know.
Like both of you guys have recently just said, a lot of it does like the balance of the story. How many lines are you giving them? How many lines are you giving them as a group? The last thing people want, I think, is like, yes, you want to explore it a little bit, but you don't want to give them so many lines that you then miss out on getting another cool character added to the story like a Celeborn because you ran out of time recording because you've been so focused on the orcs. Now, the reason you explore characters who are just completely evil and only there to like kill good characters is for the YouTube hate algorithm. The people who just hate the show outright before they see anything, they're going to clip those parts, and that is going to be their Lord of the Rings of Power for them.
Right.
Yeah, that's very true. And on the other side of that issue as well, like, are we going to, like, depending on what origin story Amazon end up going with this for the orcs, are we going to see elves being corrupted and twisted into orcs, and you know, like, how are they going to handle that?
That's what I was going to ask earlier when we were talking about this and then being near Bronwyn's village. Is it something where, like, there's a bad guy out there who's capturing elves nearby somewhere, so it's got to be a village that's close to humans and elves, and he's corrupting them somewhere in like a cavern or a cave, and they're building up the army slowly over time? Or are they going to come up with a different backstory for how the orcs are created so they can make a bunch of them at once?
That is a good question. I think probably the most important clue that we have is, of course, the name of the village, and as we know, it is Southwatch.
Tir Harad, yeah.
Should be like the translation. So, if we go with it being, for example, like Harad, the area of Harad is approximately the area below, like south of Anduin, which is of course in the neighborhood of Mordor. So it kind of makes sense. Like if Sauron is going to, you know, and he has to of course make Mordor created into what we saw, what we know it becomes in the later, in the later, you know, hundreds and thousands of years. It would make sense for it to happen somewhere in that area. But it is indeed a good question. Of course, it will be interesting to see with which origin story they will go and how they will approach that, because we saw a bit of that in the Fellowship of the Ring, for example, when Sauron is creating his orcs. But there are also like theories like, are they just created in some weird way like that, or are there female orcs and male orcs and then they mate, or so it's going to be interesting. And the location is also very important, because of course if we look at the map and we have Tir Harad, and if it is indeed around south of Gondor, south of Mordor, and then we have Galadriel in Forad, right, which is like on the other side of the area that we call the West of Middle Earth. That's like on the opposite way. So yeah, the location of this is going to be a really big question regarding the origin of orcs.
Yeah.
Well, just to touch on the origins, you mentioned, are there female orcs? And Tolkien, at least once in one of his letters in response to an inquiry, said, they procreate after the manner of the children of Iluvatar, so yes, there must be female orcs. But I will say that is one plot line I don't want to see. We can leave the orc romance out. Yep.
Oh no.
I don't want to see their mating rituals.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that for sure. We can
be the Rings of Power after dark.
Yeah, we can leave that storyline unexplored maybe.
You put that as the X-ray feature bonus. After,
that's the XXX-ray feature.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of that, different types of orcs, we can.
Kyle, do wanna...
Yeah, so that actually ties in great with our next exclusive, which is that there are two different types of orcs, some being much stronger and bigger than the second set of orcs, who were smaller and acted as scouts, which is more in line with the image of the orc that we referenced earlier. So are we seeing? I hope I don't think anyone's expecting to see, Uruks versus orcs or anything like that. But what exactly is the distinction here?
Yeah, I think, is this kind of like a throwback or like an homage to Peter Jackson's, where you have the bigger, taller, stronger orcs, and then you have the characters that a lot of casual fans would like deem as like they look more like goblins, kind of like one of the images that we were looking at earlier,
right.
Or are these just two different specialized type of orcs? Like the pale orc Azog still looks pretty different than Bolg when he yells for him to go hunt the dwarves. They're still orcs, but they look very different. And then, like you're saying, the smaller ones were acting as scouts. well, how much smaller are they? Then they got to be a lot smaller than the bigger orcs, because you don't have a 9'10" dude creeping around the village scouting stuff out. It just doesn't happen like that. So they would have to be smaller, skinnier, more like fleet of foot.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that, I think with the time compression, are we going to see Gundabad? Like, are we going to see Gundabad orcs, and like, is that going to have any involvement in this? And yeah, there's a lot of interesting questions there.
Well, and I wonder, in the Lord of the Rings, we know the Uruk-hai are the result of interbreeding between men and orcs, or at least that's what's speculated by Treebeard and by Aragorn, I think, right? I don't know that it's ever actually confirmed by the narrator or by Tolkien.
I've seen it.
But so I wonder if the larger type of orc that we're going to see in this series is the product of the same thing. I think I could have sworn that there's some reference to the fact that Saruman was not the first to do that, that actually Sauron had done that early on, so that there were larger orc-man combinations, and that Saruman maybe kind of discovered that.
Well, you have troll men and things like that too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, troll men.
Yeah.
Talk about a mating ritual I don't want to see. But if we're going to see that, then I wonder if that's when we see the attack on Bronwyn's village, that maybe that's part of what's going on. I mean, we never think too much about what happens when you force a man to mate with an orc. Like, how do you get a man orc crossbreed? Well, men are probably captured, and there's some sort of forced interbreeding going on. And I really hope they don't get too explicit with any of that. But some references to the danger to villagers that they face when orcs attack, I think would be appropriate.
I was going to say, we do see in the trailer some people, and I think the internet presumes that the person that jumps with the chain on their leg, that's supposed to be Arondir. So this actually fits quite well, unfortunately, that they may be, of course, capturing residents of that village and probably other villages as well, for maybe something like that. But of course, it could also be just for slavery, again, depending on whether they will go for the children of Ilúvatar process of procreation or some like dark ritual. But we can potentially see that happening based on what we saw in the trailer.
Yeah, and I think Torn, the OneRing.net had reported in one of their reports they had speculated, I think it was just their speculation, that maybe we could see, based on some of their leaks, that maybe we could see these orc, internment camps basically. So it would be interesting if that's the direction they're going with that.
Yeah, and then you can have orcs nearby Bronwyn's village capturing people from the village to bring back, maybe the females for like reproductive purposes, and then you have Arondir want to be the person who goes and scouts out and finds out that orcs are around, and that's who's taking these people away, and he gets captured and chained, and that's when you see that trailer image where he's like jumping through the air and he's got the chain around his leg. I'm not really saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying, based on what we have here, it's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Indeed. And also, I'd like to point out like one tiny part from the Return of the King, I believe. When I think that's it's been a while since I read sadly the third part, but I think when Frodo and Sam are sneaking through Mordor, we see, I think, a couple of orcs, and one of them is like this taller, stronger orc, like the more high ranked, and then we see the other one who is like doing the scouting, and I believe that that scouting orc is referred to as Snaga.
Mm-hmm.
So we could see something like that, and they may even be referred like that, because of course that's the word from the Return of the King, so they could actually use that as well, and then like we literally see that like that relation, the big one and the smaller scouty one.
And I think Snaga translates to slave. It's like black speech for slave, which again underscores the orcs are enslaving each other, or there's classes within orcs and they don't give each other a whole lot of respect. Another way of showing why orcs are not so great.
So I would actually like to comment on that. So in South Slavic languages like Serbian or Croatian, Snaga literally means strength, but it can, of course, be, depending on the context, you can use it in a bit different ways. So this could be like, using them as like the main strength that you command, like the brawn that is commanded by the big guys. So it could be like in that context.
Right.
So it could be that Tolkien perhaps borrowed it from there.
A little bit of philology.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's great. This is what is awesome about this fellowship, is we're from all over the world, and that's these perspectives are always so cool, and it shows the breadth of Tolkien's mind, right? Like where he was really going with all of this stuff.
Yeah, and just definitely having so many perspectives. Like we are like in our group, there's like people from all sides, and then just like so many cultural perspectives and all that, and you can always hear something like some tiny interesting tidbit that you would never otherwise find out. So yeah, definitely one of the charms. Okay, so people, do you have any comments, or maybe we should let's just throw in like this final reveal for tonight, and then we can combine it with everything else. So it is said that in one of the scenes when orcs are originally scouting the village, the effects of the sun weigh on the orcs, with some getting burnt.
I'll jump in first and say, why is this news that an orc is getting potential sunburn? Is it normal for an orc to get sunburn? Is this Amazon's way of pigeonholing people to buy SPF 30 or better to take care of their domes when they're out there scouting villages? Or is it possible that in story, orcs who are corrupted the right way would be immune to the effects of like a sunburn, and that maybe some of these scouting orcs weren't properly corrupted to have that like 100% conversion, and they're weaker, and that's part of why they're being used as scouts, and that's why they are melting in the sunlight.
As always, our dwarf always asks the right questions. Mike, what do you want to say?
So I thought this was a little interesting because, I mean, obviously we know that orcs don't like the sun. It's said a million times in the Lord of the Rings, in the Silmarillion, that they don't like the sun. But nowhere, I did a little searching, I don't think anywhere does it say they actually experience physical burns, right? Their symptoms are all, it's more like they got a really bad hangover. They get woozy, their legs are wobbly, they're tired, they just hate it. They hate being in the sun, they don't want to run in the sun. But we know that they can do it if forced. I mean, in the Two Towers, the Uruk-hai force the orcs from Barad-dûr and from Moria, I think, they force them to run in the sun, and they hate it, but they can do it, and they don't burn. It doesn't describe their skin smoking or anything like that. So, why are they doing that here? It's an interesting choice of adaptation, maybe to simplify it and in a more visual way show what they experience in the sun. One thing I don't love about it is I think that hatred of the sun, as many things in Tolkien's works, it's more of a spiritual thing than a purely physical one. Orcs, and Gollum hates the sun, not because Gollum is allergic to the sun actually. I mean, he was once a hobbit, he could live in the sun, but it's sort of due to the corruption of his spirit over long years, he just comes to hate it. And they hate elvish water. Why? Because their bodies are allergic to it? I don't think so. It's because they are so corrupted. They hate things that are pure and closer to Iluvatar, closer to the elves, or closer to Iluvatar. So Tolkien tended to show things as more of a spiritual battle, and I think that the hatred of the sun is reflective of that. And I think simplifying it into just, well, they get sunburns because that's how their skin works, it kind of maybe it still works, and maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it will still accomplish that, but I like the nuance of it being more of sort of an internal spiritual thing than a purely physical one.
Well, I think that you definitely, I absolutely agree with what you just said, but I think that there is also like this connection between a corrupted spirit, and then that translates into the physical aspect. So through the corruption of the spirit, you can potentially become like physically allergic to something. Maybe that is like the connection there. Though I do agree that it's not maybe like we didn't really know about orcs getting burnt. I also don't remember that. But maybe that is the thread that connects what you just said with what's happening here, what they're aiming for.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and is there some sort of plot line that can get introduced that would make this have some sort of sense maybe later in the season, that the other races figure out that orcs in this particular adaptation have issues with the sun, so maybe they try to do their traveling during the day, they try to come up with their plans, or move from area to area during the day to get away from orcs or kind of get in on them. That way, if orcs can't go out in the sun because they're twilight vampires or whatever, they like, this is their way of like them outsmarting the orcs then by learning one of their potential weaknesses. And I wonder how we're reporting all this stuff, but I like to tell everybody all the time, what we report is not going to be full context of everything that we hear, and a lot of things sound ridiculous on paper or even out of my mouth. But then when you see them on screen, ideally it'll make more sense and not be as horrific as you're imagining it in your head.
I've been incredibly relieved to determine that my imagination when it comes to hearing some of these things is horrible.
Well, to your point, in terms of the context, they get sunburned, but we don't know how extreme that reaction is. Is it just like their skin starts smoking? Are like they vampires, or are they just have increased skin sensitivity? In which case, I'm an orc because I sunburn really badly.
Same.
So which side of the spectrum is it on? And I hope it's more the latter, because otherwise literally all of our battle scenes are going to need to be at night, because the orcs will never come out during the daytime, which kind of limits a lot of the plot lines you can explore.
Yeah.
But they can also make this into the one of the reasons why Sauron creates Mordor in the way he does, like with the Mount Doom, and maybe like he also creates like that cloud that's approaching Minas Tirith during the War of the Rings. So maybe they can make this into like one other reason behind Sauron's plans with Mordor and all that, so that maybe they could tie that in. But of course, as Barking says, like, of course this is just pure speculation on what we are saying now, and just like going step and step further.
Yeah, I think again the exclusives that we are reporting, those are, that's what we've been given, that we've been able to verify on our end. But the how all this gets done isn't exactly 100% always known to us. And even if we did, in some cases, we just unfortunately can't tell everybody for various reasons.
Barking, you made a good point earlier. Maybe this is all just a play for the sunscreen lobby. Everybody who watches Amazon Lord of the Rings on their computer, you're going to start getting ads for sunscreen.
Yeah, there's going to be a link right there on the Prime Video page.
Big SPF is a killer.
You're going to watch an orc scratch the top of his head, then reach into a pouch, and it's going to be Amazon warehouse branded skincare. And he's going to rub it on there, and then he's going to be able to go out and fight the goodies.
I like it.
I mean, they did make like, is it called Raid Shadow Legends? I think they have like a really good series of commercials. Yeah, regarding the regarding like orcs being the main characters in commercials. So I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing something like that. That would be. I would watch the commercial at least, even though I probably wouldn't buy the sunscreen.
Now, before we go and finish wrapping up, I would like to say we appreciate everybody who tunes into these videos. It does mean a lot, and it helps get our content out there for everybody to see. But we especially appreciate people who are in the community, and they are very active, and they are good apples, and they help keep conversation in the various platforms on track with what we're reporting in videos, and not really going off topic too much. And we just wanted to give a couple shout outs to some of these people on the Fellowship of Fans subreddit and on our website. If you haven't seen, Celeborn 2001 actually wrote our first guest article, but he's also active on our subreddit. On Discord, I'm going to butcher this top one, and so apologies, but I'm going to go with O4NBOD, 04NBOD, Barlaman Butterbur, Kierdan the Simp Right, Daft, Florian, Jeremy, Lord Varus 92, Milu, Scuttlefish, Gino, Welshie, and Corvid. And in the YouTube chat, Enerdil, Again, apologies if I butcher the top one. I put the difficult ones up top. James Aaron, Kieran Curran, Steve Sadler, and Rukia's Bankai. I noticed you guys in Discord, on YouTube chat, and on the subreddit every single week, constantly being a good member of our community. So just wanted to put that in one of these videos at some point. We've been meaning to do it for a while, and apologies that we haven't already. But we really do truly appreciate all the quality comments from every single one of you. And as we notice more and more people, we'll continue to do shouts out like these in future videos, not in every one. But we wanted to make a point to say thank you to you guys specifically for all that you've done to help spread the word of Fellowship and just being a good member of the greater Lord of the Rings fandom. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in the community right now, so it's been like super refreshing that we can come back to this week after week and have a legit conversation about our passion, our shared passion, which is Tolkien. And yeah, thanks to everyone for that, for sure.
And they say that elves have a way with words, but we have our
there you go.
dwarf here. I would put like on a 1v1 versus Elrond, or Maglor or someone. Like I wouldn't be sure they would win. Like well said, Barking. I'll just join and say that everything that Kyle and Barking just said. Seriously, like it's always so lovely to see like the comments that say that support us in any way, and that just like share the enthusiasm and hope that this show will be amazing, because we all hope. We cannot know. We're just hoping, and that's one of the most important things that Tolkien's works teach us. Hope, and we'll see. So thank you all so much for every single comment, like, share, whatever you ever did for us. Thank you so much for that.
Would you gents like to wrap it up now?
I was going to ask, so does anyone have any other comments regarding any of the news?
I'm all commented out.
Yeah.
I think we covered this from quite a few angles. So hopefully, of course, if we missed something, everybody feel free to remind us of your theories, or if we fail to mention some important tidbit or like a particular angle that you would like to explore in the comments. And thank you for tuning in with us. Thank you also to Mike. It was such a pleasure to have you here. Absolutely. Thank you for that Elrond quote in particular. It was amazing. And yeah, we hope to see you both next time, or one of the next times. And of course, thanks to our friendly Master Dwarf for joining in again with us on the Second Age show. And shout out to our dear friend Lakitia, who wasn't with us this week, but hopefully next week she will join us again. We miss her dearly, always.
No comment.
I would like to plug real quickly from the Watch Party LOTR group. They, you talked about it earlier, but they also have a Wheel of Time one. And their Wheel of Time actually isn't just people who are like experts in the lore in the community. It's people who are watching it that haven't read the books for the first time. So if you tune into episodes like that, it's definitely a mix of, it's pretty cool hearing, like we talked about it before we went live, but like, my mom will text me about like seeing the Super Bowl commercial and how excited she was, and she wanted to talk about it and get my thoughts and everything, but she's not like an avid follower of Lord of the Rings. It's cool seeing people react to things differently than you, because you have like this different like space of, we're very in tune with all the latest and greatest rumors and leaks. So just, if you haven't watched Wheel of Time yet, or you're just interested in seeing how both normal lore fans as well as people who are new to it period kind of react, you should definitely check out their episodes. I've tuned into 2 or 3. Also, Mike, I appreciate you guys. I don't tell people this, but I regularly reach out to different content creators in the community, and I probably hit you guys up like once every other podcast that you do, and they always reply back. So I appreciate that. Thank you for not ignoring me like some of the others do. And y'all know who you are.
Mm-hmm. No names.
No, we love hearing from you and from anybody who reaches out. I mean, that's kind of the joy of doing this, right? I mean, that's what's so great about the fellowship. You guys get to hang out together, and we get to meet other people in the community. I would never have been on this show with you if it wasn't for doing this podcast. So that's the great pleasure, is just connecting with other fans or people who are discovering it for the first time. I'm really loving this show just for that reason, the new Amazon show, because it's getting all these people to come together and talk about what they love and what they're worried about, and it's really wonderful.
Well said. Okay, people, it was a pleasure talking to you. So I guess we can wrap up tonight. So goodbye, thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.
See you next time.